Nginibingelele-ke balaleli bayo i-North Coast Radio 104 MHZ. Ulwazi kaManqele-ke lo undlethele iy'ndaba zayo i-current affairs lapha-ke kuyikhuluma ukhululeke. Namhlanje-ke balaleli nginiphathele izindaba ezihlangene-ke nokwakhiwa kwezindawo, ukwakhiwa kwamabhilidi, imigwaqo, nalokhu okubizwa phecelezi infrastructure. Lena-ke i-topic yanamhlanje-ke idila nge-building information modeling. Kusho ukuthi-ke ulwazi oluhambelana nezakhiwo, whether izakhiwo mhlawumbe ezasemakhaya, izakhiwo eziseduzane nolwandle, noma izakhiwo zasemadolobheni. Kuzobe-ke kukhona-ke ingqayizivele yomhlangano ozobe ulaphana-ke eThekwini eMhlanga at the Pearls kusukela ngomhla ka-26 kuya kumhla ka-27 kuMarch kuyo-ke lo nyaka lo ka-2026, lapho kuzobe kuhlangane khona-ke bonke abaholi nabaphethe zonke-ke izigceme zakho-ke ukwakhiwa kwezindawo. Ngithole-ke ukuxhumana nokuhlala phansi ngaxoxisana naye-ke oyi-technical manager yenkampani iModerna, inkampani-ke edila ngokwenza-ke phecelezi ama-softwares nama-applications asetshenziswa onjiniyela nama-architect nalaphana-ke kwi-field ye-construction. Yena uThabelo Netshivhungululu oqhamuka laphana-ke eGoli uzobe ekhona-ke naye omunye wabakhulumi abazobe bekhona kuyo-ke ingqayizivele-ke yomhlangano we-building information modeling ezobe ilaphana-ke eMhlanga at the Pearls for 2 days, 26 to the 27th of March 2026. Ube sengichazela-ke kabanzi ngokuthi ibaluleke ngani-ke le field noma-ke ngithi-ke mhlampe-ke i-sector edila ngayo i-building information modeling. Kuningi-ke mlaleli ukuphathelene ne-technology, ezokudweba neze-engineering eziphathelene-ke nakho ukwakhiwa kwezindawo, whether ezasemakhaya, ezingasolwandle, eziseduzane namahlathi, nezikhona-ke laphana-ke emadolobheni. Sizozwa-ke kabanzi-ke ukuthi-ke ibaluleke ngani, nanokuthi-ke futhi-ke yini abayenzayo njengenkampani ukuthi basize basebenzisane nezemfundo ephakeme ekuthenini-ke abafundayo abantu beqeda ukufunda beqede sebenolwazi lwawo umsebenzi, ngoba isikhathi esiningi siyazithola ukuthi-ke kuba khona iy'nkinga ezibangela ukuthi-ke abantu asebefundile ama-graduates kabanzi abe nenkinga yokuthi bathole umsebenzi ngenxa yokuthi-ke lokho kuthiwa-ke i-experience abakabi nayo. Ake simcaphune-ke sizwe-ke le ngxoxo besiyiphathelewe wuye-ke laphana uThabelo.
Traditionally, when we put plans together for buildings or roads or bridges, right, traditionally it was done on paper, like with drawing boards. I'm sure you've seen that, Lwazi. So with technology so quickly developing, the industry moved over from paper to working on a computer, and we're still producing line drawings. So when you get to site, in some instances, you find you just have a drawing with a floor plan and elevations, and then builders will use that to build a building. Okay. Now with what's happened since early 2000, right, the technology to design a building has changed. Besides just working in a 3D environment where you create a 3D model where you can see a realistic building, architects and engineers are able to add information as well to those models, right? And that information is handed over to the owner of the building to operate their building for the next foreseeable future, right? So what I do and what we do, we help the engineers and architects set up their business and help them with their skill levels to be able to deliver that information that's required by their owner. I hope that was simple enough.
No, that is wonderful. You know, that is so insightful. You've literally unpacked it and you've explained it in such a way that anybody, educated or not, can actually understand the importance of what you do. Now, going to our first question, and thank you so much for that. Going to our first question, BIM, I like to call it BIM. It's the Building Information Modeling in South Africa. You have got over 15 years in the AEC industry. How is the Building Information Modeling revolutionizing project delivery in South Africa, you know, from urban high-rises to the rural infrastructure?
Awesome. That's beautiful, man. Right. So as you know, as I explained earlier, BIM is information modeling. Some people like saying building information management. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of a background, in South Africa, when we adopted BIM, using softwares like Revit, which allows us to create this information models, right? Initially, the industry moved over from like a 2D flat environment to producing 3D models for like quite a long period, right? And what that created in the industry, you'd have, surprisingly enough, you'd have architects with different standards, right? So let's say, Lwazi, you own a couple of malls or shopping centers. You'd receive this shopping center in a different format from another, and then your second shopping center will come in a different format. At the end of the day, you wouldn't be able to manage, you eventually be able to manage your buildings, but that's a lot more effort to run your buildings because you don't have a standardized set of information that you're receiving. So what happened in the industry a while back, like I think almost 10 years ago in the UK, the government mandated a standard to control this information that's being received in the built environment, right? That obviously trickled globally and became an international standard for digital delivery. It's ISO 19650, right? This standard forces architects, engineers, etc., to follow a system to deliver information. And now because of that, it's sort of created this fast-tracked the adoption of BIM in the industry because owners are saying, I want my building delivered in this standard. So everyone else in the industry has to upskill themselves, align their business with what's expected to deliver, specifically government and big private sector projects as well, right? And I'll give you two examples. Obviously, when you're looking at high-rise buildings, you'd find that in some projects, there's a project where we were working and a South African architect is collaborating with professionals from different countries. Right? And you'd find that those professionals are a little bit ahead, just slightly ahead with their business set up compared to our South African guys, right? And that type of collaboration has sort of also fast-tracked that, right? Around 2016, 2017, I got an invite by an architectural firm in Kokstad, right? And these guys, Kokstad it's developed, but it had a lot of rural areas. And the guys were doing some government projects in the rural areas, and they adopted this BIM workflows to deliver those projects. They were able to win the project, firstly, faster, because the clients could understand what the guys were putting together. They were able to quantify those projects in time, right, without relying on, I don't know if you know, like our QSs work, they'll take what the architects have developed, reprint and remeasure it, right, which takes long to get like a bill of quantities put together. So with these guys in Kokstad, because they adopted this BIM workflow, they've been able to deliver a lot of the work in the rural areas using BIM. Right? And I like this question because BIM is not limited by where you are. Right? It's purely for me. If you've got the right equipment, the knowledge, and the right tools, you're able to deliver a project using this concepts that's been around.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And for our listeners, AEC stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. These are the core sectors Oceans involved in designing building. I love how the fact that you've brought up the rural areas, that this is something that is important for rural communities as well, and for rural councillors, traditional councils, you name it. If somebody lives in a rural area, they are impacted by BIM and they need to understand exactly what it is. And it takes me to our next question, rural development focus. Now, rural South Africa, faces infrastructure gaps. How can building information modeling tools bridge these and ensure that cost-effective builds in remote areas like KwaZulu-Natal?
Okay, so now I like that question, right? So what typically happens with rural development, historical information is not available. That's the first key problem, right? So for example, I like using examples. I hope you don't mind, Lwazi.
I love humanity, definitely.
Yeah. So there's a project that we're doing. It's It's in the rural areas in Northwest, right? And the professional team that's working on that project are sitting in Gauteng, right? There's so limited amount of data for that area because it was never surveyed. It was owned by a chief somewhere, right? And obviously, you know how land is allocated in rural areas. They'll give you a portion, mark it out. There's an agreement between the owner and the chief, and then that's your piece of land. Now, because of that lack of data, it creates a gap. But now, when BIM comes in our processes, we call it laser scanning, right? You're able to go in there, capture the existing conditions of that rural area or rural development, and bring it into the BIM environment. Once we captured it, immediately we have real-time information of that area, right? And we're able to develop contextually, right? And there are tools currently that are being used to acquire that data, so developers can make use of that data to improve those rural areas.
Fantastic. I love it. Now, you've championed digital twins. Could they simulate resilient rural infrastructure against things like climate challenges, floods in our coastal regions?
Definitely. I wish I was showcasing something. We're not on radio at this time.
We're gonna plan that.
Right. So there's I don't know if you're familiar with a terminology, GIS.
Yes. That's information systems.
Yes, geographic information system.
Yeah.
Right. So in our setup with the tools that we use, we've got a GIS platform from Esri, right? And it's got simulation tools specifically for areas like KZN, right? For flooding, checking your flood lines, weather, right? We could even go as far as, obviously, when you're putting up a building in a city, we can do a noise analysis, sunlight analysis, etc., right? So the tools are there to do those type of tests and simulations specifically for development, right? As you know, in South Africa, recently we've experienced a lot of floods, surprisingly, even in Limpopo, where I come from, right? And the reason for that, from road design, infrastructure, and the buildings, there's no analysis done. The guys just come in, put a drawing together, sell it to the people, and the guys move in. Right, and that creates a huge problem, as you guys have experienced as well. But there are tools that, with a BIM workflow, where we can simulate that type of information. And it would go back to your digital twin, where digital twins come in. So you know this, but a digital twin is a digital representation of the physical building or asset. Could be a road, your piping network, your flood systems, etc. Right. So once that information is captured either with a laser scan or remodeled using this design tools, right, we can bring it into ArcGIS, for example. Right, it's a system that allows us to create those simulations. So we're bringing that existing information and start running simulations to as far as you can go as far as, I wish I was showing you, can go as far as specifying the amount of rain that falls in a certain area and see how the river floods from, let's say, up at the Drakensberg all the way down to Richards Bay, and you can see which areas get impacted by the flooding. And then from there, plan ahead and warn people, tell them not to build in certain areas, etc., or improve your piping network.
Fantastic. Still on the topic of rural areas, you know, in Richards Bay, where I come from, we've got the city, we've got the suburbs, right, residential area, and then we've got what's called an agri-village. So right after the suburbs, you've got villages like in the rural areas, but it's a village that's right next to the sea. It's like a 1 kilometer. It's the beach. You know. Now this is quite interesting because it brings into my next question. When you imagine smart rural villages, you know, of the future powered by BIM, what tech stack would you prioritize, for sustainable housing and energy in places next to Umhlanga and the hinterlands along Richards Bay?
What's smart tech? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. BIM being the backbone. Remember, BIM would be the vehicle to collect the data for those areas, right? So the first thing that we'll need to look at is the people that are working in those areas currently, right? The type of tools that they have, right? So for me, the first thing is always education, empowering the influencers of those communities, right? Right. And that obviously involves geographical information systems and your information models. So that's a vehicle for me that collects the data. That's the first part to create and get that digital twin. Right. And now looking at an area that's rural like that, but with a lot of opportunities specifically, like I'm sure it's an agri village because there's a lot of farming, et cetera, right? We're able to introduce solar with batteries, right? We can run analysis using BIM, right, to see how much power can go in there, how much power can be generated back to the grid as well, right? There's a thing around microgrids where with those solar roofs, etc., solar panels, we start creating microgrids around the community where it starts serving itself, right? Something that's already getting done probably in the suburban areas is smart metering, right? For electricity that can get connected back to your digital twin, right? So as a city, your municipality, instead of, I don't know if they still walk around and read meters, right? But smart metering basically connects back to your
municipality
and help the guys just control the usage of power in the area, right? Another very nice thing that's coming up, because we're creating this 3D models, right? And it's a technology that's not very popular yet in South Africa, right? And something that we've been working on at Moderna, right, is assisting guys with like modular housing. And what I mean by that, it's sort of creating your housing in a factory and then assembling it on site, right? So that improves, that impacts sustainability for a city instead of having construction sites all over the place. It's quicker as well to renovate and improve the older houses in the area, right? And obviously, it's a lower cost as well for the community. Those are the different tech stacks I could probably bring into the community, into a community like this agri village that you have in Richards Bay.
This is wonderful because I love your answers because you've literally unpacked, but most importantly, you've answered my next question, which was looking at integrating real-time data for water, power, and community services. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, let's move on to the event that's coming up next week. It's the Building Information Modeling event in Umhlanga. Now, for that upcoming event, what breakthroughs in Autodesk tools like Revit will you highlight for African audiences?
Okay, sure. I like the way you say African audiences. Right. Okay. So what I'm going to be talking about in my talk is why digital twins stall or don't work, right? And I'll be looking at design tools like Revit. It's an Autodesk product that's used by architects and engineers to put together buildings, right? We were talking about infrastructure space. The guys use Civil 3D, right? And obviously, the biggest focus for me, even though we're in Africa, is looking at the collaboration space, having a common data environment where everyone could collaborate, share information, right? Also, owners and operators of those buildings get involved in the design stage of a project. My idea for my talk, I'll talk about what the conference will be focusing on as well. My idea for the whole talk really is, my speech is really to equip the professionals and show them where everything fits so they're able to deliver information required and operate their assets at the end of the day, right? And if you look, sorry, Lwazi, I hope I'm not cutting you off.
No, no, carry on.
The reason BIM Africa conference was sort of created, right? I think I mentioned it earlier. BIM initially in South Africa and Africa was just seen as a design tool. You could create pretty pictures and see your 3D model, right? And we discovered that BIM actually is a little bit more than that. It's a strategic driver of how cities are planned, built, and operated, right? So the nice thing with this conference, we've got stakeholders from every single part of infrastructure, from the guys that do roads, the guys that do the water networks, electricity, buildings, facility managers, guys that develop, and then owners as well. So it's a nice space to come through and collaborate and network with other stakeholders in the industry. And it's so funny, Lwazi, like in the industry, I'm an architect by profession, right? But in the industry, you'd find that you go there as an owner, you see a piece of land and you want to develop, right? You'll get a land surveyor to do their work, right? They do it, you pay them, they'll give you what they need, and then they walk away. And the architect gets involved, they do their stuff, then engineers, etc., right? Now with BIM, we can't work like that. We have to work collaboratively in one common data environment. In our industry, we normally say, for example, I'll use you, Lwazi, as an example. We're going to create the single source of truth, and you've got project A, and all your stakeholders working on this project A will be sharing information in one common data environment and speaking the same language, right? Which eventually helps you get the correct handover and to run your building. I hope I answered you.
Absolutely.
I feel like I spoke too much there.
We need such information and we need such answers because, you know, it creates such great impact and it's such an empowering tool. It's so educational because as the world changes and as countries develop and as places develop, you found that, well, I found that one of the things that keeps some people behind is access to simple information that could be understood, like the information that you have. So I absolutely appreciate it, and I know our audiences will as well. Now, Umhlanga's BIM event also spotlights innovation, and there's a big chunk of what you are speaking about that speaks to innovation. How will it address the skills shortages for rural projects across South Africa and places like KZN?
So, right, we're partnering with a lot of institutions, educational institutions, right? And the skills shortage really, right, is like what you mentioned. The information is not readily, what we've picked up, it's not readily available, right? Even when you look at a tertiary level, you find that the guys are still studying. If they go like look at a civil engineer or an architect, that curriculum that they go through is things that are from like 20 years ago, right? And then when they talk about BIM, BIM is not taught correctly, right? So what we've done, we partnered up with a few of the educational institutions from tertiary level, right? And there's some work that's being done, conversations being done in the high school level as well, right? But most of our focus is looking at professionals that we want to set them up in a way that when they leave varsity, they're already equipped enough to enter the industry, right? This skills shortage you're referring to, I know you're talking about rural projects. This is impacting the entire industry, right? Urban projects here in Sandton, Durban, etc. Companies are not getting the right skills from varsity, and like what you said, it's just a lack of information. Right, so the work that we've done to answer your question is just to work with the institutions to cover the skills gap. Right.
Wonderful, man. It's such an important element. It's such an important aspect as well. Just staying on that education shortage of skills, what did you find was the gap? Why would institutions like universities have content that is still outdated? What are some of the hindrances that cause institutions of education, of higher learning, not to be updated. We see this across not just architecture and engineering, across many, what do you call it, sectors, and industries, whereby people come out of university, a lot of money is spent in university to study. And when the work environment is not able to absorb them, and in such a way that South Africa has got a huge what do you call it, skills gap, a critical skills gap. I always ask myself, how is this possible when we've got so many universities? What did you find is that whole thing that creates that gap between varsity and not ready to be absorbed by the workplace?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. Right, so the first thing, it's exposure, right? Like, for example, in a university, you are taught as an architect how to put a building together, the science behind designing a building. Okay. And the guys, I know there's traditionally we used to have 1 year, you used to have technicons and all that stuff, where they'll do 1 year, 2 year of practicals. Right. And those programs, I don't know how effective they are currently, but those programs I don't see a lot of exposure in the universities. Right. So the universities currently, I have an example here with the CITB, right, and also TBCA, TBSA, right. They have a program that they're running. It's an educational framework program where they're running with academia, where they'll be collaborating basically with the guys that are doing construction and put them in the real world during their studies. So the first thing for me has always been exposure. Right, by the universities themselves. I don't really mean the students themselves. Currently, information is everywhere. So the guys go in, they Google, they research stuff, but they're researching information out of context. They don't know how it works in the real world. Right, so that's a big thing that we've been seeing. We have one of our big clients, well, one of the leading architectural firms in South Africa, right, and they run a bursary program, right, where they identify some students throughout the country, help them with their studies, but also during the holidays, bring them in their office and they actually get involved in real world projects. When those guys leave varsity, they have a bigger potential to get a job, right? In their CV already, they could say they've worked at this specific institute. You with me? All right. So we need to start creating those type of relationships between academia and corporate and the professional world. The second thing for me, specifically in the built environment, right? This has been happening for a long time, but digital delivery was not standardized. Right? Something I could say it's just over 10 years in the industry. Now, for academia to adopt a workflow that's not standardized is not very easy. Right. Now, because there's a standard to it and it's international, we've seen now academia, the guys and the lecturers, the deans, they've now sort of opened their eyes and woken up and seen that, oh, there's a standard. That's in industry. These are people delivering projects, but we're not showing or training or teaching our students on this digital delivery. There's a lot of work now that we're doing with academia to give them tools and content to be able to educate their students in regard to information management, etc.
Wonderful stuff. That's such an important part of everything. I always say, I think our country took a bit too long to adopt digital, in all frameworks, in all sectors. It's amazing how in some sectors, I don't know what we're waiting for, but to adopt, and adapt to digital has taken us forever. All right, looking at the broader impact, my second last question to you, from your role at Moderna, what's one building information modeling success story in transforming rural development, specifically in rural development that or how can SMEs, and how can SMEs replicate it?
There's a project that I did which we worked on for government. It was a Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in Pretoria, right? For that building, the client, in this instance, which will be government, wanted a digital twin as a deliverable, as part of their handover. Right. And for that specific project, we worked on, obviously we had to come and show them the workflows and the processes, right? And the team, professional team that was working there, had to appoint smaller or medium enterprises, right, to deliver the project. So there was a transfer of knowledge and skills to the SMEs on that specific project, right? Another example, because I'll use KZN, is not necessarily in Richards Bay. Yeah, it's around the, what's that sugar place? Well, it's around the Bridge City area, right? There's a mall and then there's a courthouse.
Wait,
right?
in Uguamashu.
Yeah, that side, right? In that project, it's a similar. This is the easiest way to equip SMEs, right? I've got another third one as well, not necessarily in KZN. In the project, once again, we got involved as digital delivery consultants, right? We put together all the protocols that are required to deliver the project, right? And to get the SMEs involved, right? And the reason we set it up like that, they get appointed on a project, right? But then the learning and the skill sets is sort of covered for them in the agreements, and then they go in, they get equipped on how to deliver a project and how BIM works, right? And that the transfer of knowledge is done in that manner, right? My biggest success story is project in Northwest in Rustenburg, right? And for that project, and I'm talking builders, contractors, and not just engineers and architects. For that project, we had a contractor, black female-owned business. I think it had been around for 3 to 5 years, and they hadn't really been involved in a project of that scale. Wow. Right? They got appointed green, not knowing them. Right? We started getting involved in them and training them up on the solutions and the tools that we use. Right? And currently, that specific company is winning more projects because they've got a ISO 19650 certification and experience on their side. Right? So to answer your question, to help SMEs, they need to get involved, and the guys that have been in the industry for longer need to sort of adopt the smaller businesses to help them acquire the knowledge, get the experience, and then eventually they're able to move on their own.
Wonderful stuff. Looking ahead, how will BIM and digital strategies empower South Africa's rural economies, creating jobs and smart villages for the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure, big question, eh? Right. I want to go back to so BIM itself and these digital strategies are one of the biggest drivers in the industry, right? And because it's something we can't run away from, right? It creates a new sort of space for education. So guys, don't just go in and learn the actual skill to draw a road or a bridge or a house. They need to know how to actually work with information and data, right? And I don't really believe that there's a difference between the rural economy and the urban side or the suburban side, right? It's literally just access to information. The information is there already. The skills are already there in the rural areas. We just need to make sure that the guys have access to it. And now what's happening now within this AI era, a lot of people are getting excited about AI, but AI in our industry doesn't work if the data is not standardized, right? If you don't understand how we putting the data together and how we're delivering that data, AI almost becomes redundant, right? So the biggest thing for, I think, the young people and people in the industry now, even in rural economies, is getting an understanding on how data works in construction or in the built environment, or just going through data analytic courses, right, and preparing themselves for what's coming in the next 5 years.
Wow. Important, very important. Data is such an important topic, and it's separate from AI. Data has been there so long, and I think when it comes to data, what I've picked up is it's the wording and, again, how the information is understood. Data is basically bits and pieces of information, right? Information that is used in a certain field or a sector, but it's basically all the necessary information that's used to come up with decisions to do certain things.
Exactly. In certain markets, in construction, I'll give you an example in the USA, on one of the platforms that we use, called Autodesk Construction Cloud. This is what we use to coordinate the teams or stakeholders or a project, right? In USA, a QS can go onto a project, open up a project, get a quantity of bricks that are going to be used to put together this project, and then request for a quote already, right? Because that information is standardized and it's aligned with the guys that are fabricating and creating the material to build the project. Now in South Africa, for example, currently our data is all over the place. All right, it's all over the place in a sense like it's either sitting on an Excel sheet somewhere or there's some PDF sitting somewhere, etc. So now because it's not all in one common data environment, it's very difficult to even involve AI to get that type of insight onto your project. So that's what we help the market do, right? Just get your project with a standardized data set, speaking the same language. Then it's easy for a QS to come on and see, okay, the architects, structural engineers are using this much of concrete, this much of steel, etc., and they're able to plan ahead during design phases as well.
I would imagine this also helps things like budgeting.
Exactly, right. So I'll give you an example. I started about it earlier. When a project is kicked off, right, so you come in, you identify a piece of land. Before the guys start designing, the developer would know exactly what the budget would be for the project. They'd come in and say, we got a budget of 10 million rand to build this, right? That's information, that's data that's then used for the professional team to create barriers for them to design around that limit of 10 million, right? Which means the architect can just go and say, okay, I'm going to import stuff from Dubai, for example, or China. They have a set budget briefing to follow, right? Now, because we all work in a common data environment, the QS before tender stage is able to monitor and verify the progress of this design information coming through. They don't have to wait 3 months to then receive tender documentation, tell the engineering team, you guys failed the tender process, go back and do some value engineering, you need to be within 10 million. So the whole process incorporates the entire professional team with the costing guys to control the budget, and it makes it easier for the design team to design in context as well.
Thabelo, this is easily for me one of the most insightful conversations that I've had this whole year, and I wish you all the best. I will definitely be seeing you in Umhlanga, and looking forward to that event, man. You go out there and do best, but we'll be out here vouching for you. And most importantly, the information that you have is so useful, and I know that our audience is really going to enjoy it. All right, thanks a lot, man. And then I will speak to you because I would love for us to have just the visuals for some of these questions, those that you may have, and so that I could just attach them on edit. I would love to have the show to be on radio, but also people can go online and be able to view illustrations of what we're talking about. I think it'll be very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will get that information ready for you as well.
Fantastic stuff, man. I'll send you my email and then you can send it through to me. But you have yourself a wonderful day, and thank you so much for making time for North Coast Radio. Thanks a lot, my brother. Cheers. That is the technical manager at Moderna. His name is Thabelo Netshivhungululu. It's a wealth of information, and what I would say, I would encourage community leaders, whether you are a councillor, whether you are in community services, whether you're in infrastructure, public works, whether you're a student, and whether you're a citizen, whether you are residential, whether you're somebody who's trying to see where do I fit in during this transformation time where technology is coming in and I'm out there in the rural area. One of the important things that Thabelo said was, it doesn't matter anymore whether you're in the rural area or whether you're in the cities. What matters is information and what we do with it. My name is Lwazi. You are listening to Kuluma Ukululeke on North Coast Radio.